The Central Bank of Angola forecasts 2011 growth at 4%. It's significantly down from the highs we'd seen in Angola in recent years that even hit growth of about 9%. Your views on the state of the economy this year?
Between 2005 and 2008, Angola actually had growth through it was into high double digits. It was growing faster than any other country on earth, for good reason, starting from a low base, particularly China coming in and becoming really involved in the country, lots of infrastructure development and so on. 2009, unfortunately, saw a total collapse, down to just about zero growth rate for various reasons. We heard about the external reasons a little earlier on the program. There were internal reasons related to, let's call it imprudent financial and economic management, as a result of which the president had to call in the IMF. And the IMF laid down strict conditions for being helpful to help Angola out of the problem. That has happened. The president has shaken the leadership and management tree. You've got people who can deliver now in positions, and things are really looking good for this year.
Okay, it's reported that the government will be spending over $2 billion reviving factories, particularly improving on manufacturing output and that sort of thing. Which will be priority areas for the government?
The government really wants to revive the industrial base that existed pre-1975. There was quite a strong industrial base, but it just hasn't been possible to do anything substantial about it since, even since 2002. So a lot of effort being put into re-establishing companies that went dormant or stagnant or completely disintegrated, and to expand. And there's some interesting projects. The government basically has spent and will continue to spend a huge amount of money providing infrastructure for these industrial developments in various locations throughout the country.
I mean, during the good times, when the oil price was very high, we were talking about rates of return in Angola above 20%. For an investor moving into that economy today, what's a more realistic figure?
Well, we saw a very interesting case just end of last week. A small investment of a couple of $1 million in May last year resulted in an income for the company of $21 million by the end of December. Now, I'm not suggesting that everybody's going to be doing that, but it's an indication of what one person can do in Angola if they go in and internalize an Angola paradigm as opposed to their home country paradigm.
What's an Angola paradigm?
You know, we do business in our own countries, and we develop a paradigm for understanding our own country and managing business that way. You actually have to cross the cross-cultural diversity gap between your own country and Angola.
I mean, the reason I'm asking the Angola paradigm in particular is because Angola consistently fares badly on the World Bank's Doing Business report. We're told the bureaucracy in Angola is unprecedented. We're told that things aren't particularly transparent in Angola. To set up a business can take you over a year. To shut down a business and wind down your operations can take you 3 years. You can be on the ground in Angola about to start a business. These are all anecdotal things from analysts and others who've been in Angola. And you could find yourself not transacting for as much as 3 years because you don't know the right people, you don't speak the language. How do we get around the Angola paradigm?
Indeed, a South African company has just been through that painful experience of waiting for 3 years for a government decision on their big project. However, you know, the bureaucracy of Angola is very little different to the bureaucracy of a South African company investing into or trading with Europe. There's a tendency to think that, oh well, Africa is different and we needn't worry. And you know, if you go into Angola and you haven't got your documents in a row, you're going to have serious trouble. If you go into Angola vulnerable, no language capability, no understanding of the regulatory framework and so on, you're going to be in trouble. There are lots of examples of South African companies who've gone in and who are making it and doing very nicely, thank you.
Kwibi, comparatively speaking, Angola is the second largest producer of oil, but even surpassed Nigeria at some stage as an exporter of oil. And so people have really had a lot of hope for what Angola can achieve. For those who are looking into fertile investment destinations in Africa, how far ahead is Angola in terms of their cognition?
You must remember Africa, and let's now talk about Angola within Africa, provides an opportunity for somebody that wants to assume a certain amount of risk. So analysts are completely inundated with risk. It's always trying to quantify risk and trying to understand risk. But when you go and you do business in Africa, the more important thing to ask is not necessarily what's the risk you're taking, because there's risk you're taking all the time.
Yeah.
It's what are the kind of returns you're making for the kind of investment that you're putting down. So if you're putting down your last $5 million in order to try and make the proverbial $30 or $40 million, well, you're assuming a huge amount of risk for that. But if it's within a portfolio of assets, well, maybe you're not assuming that amount of risk, and maybe there are great returns to be made from this. Let me tell you why I'm excited about Angola. And Roger, you can help me here if I get some of these numbers wrong, okay? This country's got 19 million people in it, okay? They export 2 million barrels of oil per day.
Yeah.
Okay, they're within the top 20 producers of oil as far as an export destination is concerned, with 20 million people. That means on a top-line revenue basis, okay, so I'm not now taking the rest into consideration, they're providing $9.70 per person per day in oil revenues. That's why they can put the infrastructure down. You get the infrastructure thing right, you get all the rest will follow. And that's why I'm excited about Angolan growth, because I think Angolan growth will continue just to go up and up and up from, because just the fundamentals are there for me.
The fundamentals in Angola are right, but there are impediments. Inflation, for instance, on the rise, somewhere in the region of 13.4%. The dependency on oil is just too much. 85% of GDP output is from the oil sector, and hence 85% of foreign exchange earnings for the government is from this sector. So we talk about an infrastructure boom and a diversification of this economy, but the bedrock remains the oil sector, which, as we know, is a very volatile commodity. How do they get around this?
We need to remember when we talk about inflation that not so long ago, Angola was experiencing Zimbabwe-type inflation. When I lived there, it was huge. You had to convert your kwanzas to dollars within 5 minutes of selling something, otherwise it wasn't worth selling that something. 2003 came and the macroeconomics stabilized, and the inflation rate dropped tremendously, down to nearly 10%. What's happened recently is that, for example, the IMF, as one of its conditionalities of helping Angola, said cut the subsidies. So subsidy on fuel was cut, on various other things. That's contributed, unfortunately, to a slightly higher inflation. Yes, the inflation is on the high side and it needs to be addressed. As far as income is concerned, the Angolan budget for this year says that they expect to generate only 75%, not 85%, from oil flows. So that's a move in the right direction. Encouraging reindustrialization, manufacturing, tourism, agriculture, all that sort of thing is what it's all about right now. And if I can just add and say that in recent years, millions of Angolan kids are getting a better education. Millions of Angolans who didn't have clean water now have clean water. Millions of Angolans who didn't have health care now have health care. Things are really looking good.
All right, so they're doing a lot better also in terms of rankings on the human development indicators. Kwibi, a final comment from you. Positive assessments and sentiments provided by Mr. Roger Tremeer. 5% of GDP will come from the non-oil sector, with infrastructure as key. What should the authorities be considering in terms of really trying to make their economy a lot more dynamic?
Well, firstly, what I think they're doing is they're saying, okay, we're creating money from oil revenues. Okay, so that's going to continue for the next however long, decade, 2 decades. What's the next best thing we could put money into? Well, it's industrial. So if we can create an industrial base, we've got the people. If we can create the industrial base, then we can start creating knowledge workers beyond it. If we can create the knowledge workers, we can then start creating a country where we do general social upliftment. And that's what you're starting to see happening in that economy. So, I mean, it's do much of the same. Just make sure the corruption goes away. So you've got less and less and less of that. And that's not an Angolan story, that's really an African story.